Thank you very much. Welcome to the January 29th Joint Facility Advisory Commission meeting. We are holding a hybrid public meeting, which is vote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per JFAC's electronic meeting. I think we may have a commissioner virtually. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment, cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public can attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using Microsoft link provided on the JFAC website. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option. For commissioners who are joining virtually, please keep your camera on for the meeting. For virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat should only be used for participants who need technical assistance or for members of the public to request to speak during the public comment. All public comments must be shared verbally with records during defined public comment periods. Additional notes for our members of the public, if we'd like to provide feedback and comment, we will hold public comment periods at the beginning and end of the meeting. Those comment period and allotted up to 3 minutes to speak. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So,
you know, but you put it down to the screen. On the same page.
Did you already get it? Did you get it?
I got yours. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Welcome everyone to this meeting. Thank you all for coming, being here in person. I'd like to introduce, we have first we have our new school board member and our new school board liaison, Kathleen Clark. Welcome. And we have a new member, April. Why don't we go around and kind of quickly introduce ourselves for Kathleen and also for April. I can start and then go to Claire. I'm Stacy Snyder. I've been chair of JFAC, chair for a couple years. I'm about to end my term in a couple of months. I have 2 kids that have gone through the APS system. One is in college at BCU. And been involved in facilities issues for now. I was facilities advisory commission for 6 years, so 3 years as chair, and then almost 6 years. Yeah.
I'm Claire, and so glad Stacey goes first. She reminds me how long I've been on here. I've also been on JFAC for about 6 years, and I have 2 kids in the elementary school, and I'm on some other county commission, including I got the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission. So trying to kind of grade this commission definitely started with the focus of we're talking and working together. So it's we in the community are fostering that. That's always helpful.
Hi, I'm Chen Ling. I have 2 kids in APS. I'm on the budget advisory committee for APS school board and heavily involved with that sort of thing right now. And I guess I'm a prospective member. I know I said I was going to join last year, then a crazy life stuff happened, and so I'm seeing whether now it's a good time.
Natalie Roy, I think I've been on a year, maybe. And I have 3 kids who went through APS schools, and I will have a granddaughter, but that going through as well, but a couple of years. I know. So that's it.
I'm Kathleen Clark. I am the new liaison to this committee. I'm newly elected to the school board, and but I have been in leadership roles throughout APS in the last couple of years. Mainly SEPTA, liaison to PTA, and just a very big advocate for our schools, specifically for students with disabilities.
Hi, I'm Brian Harner, an architect, and we're doing the kids. So yes, I have two kids. Went through the school
Your kids in
system.
college now?
They're well out of college. I hate to say.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one was Philadelphia, one in New York. And yeah, I guess they got them through college, got them accepted to some good colleges. They've survived Yorktown High School, so that was good.
Yeah.
Not easy. Anyway, I was a planning commissioner and for 8 years, and my term is up soon. You should take my place.
No, take mine. No,
Are you up too?
yeah,
Oh, you're both the same.
Yeah, and so welcome, enjoy.
Diana Preston, resident of Arlington, Cherryville for 27 years. And new to the whole advisory commission world. This is my first. I'm not sure exactly how I got on here. I looked at a property down the street from me and had some ideas about how I thought it might be used. Started talking to some people and then learning more about the county, and ended up on here, I think with good reason. I've learned a ton about the county that I wouldn't have learned otherwise because I don't have children in the school system, but I'm a huge proponent of education. So that's why I've been very interested in the work of this, and I'm fortunate enough tonight to have some of the work that I've been doing to be, I think, incorporated into our presentation. So I've been on it for almost 2 years.
I'm April Everett, and I've been living in Arlington for 25 years, Arlington Bridge. I have 3 children, 2 are in college, 1 is in 5th grade. I have been a parent at 6 different APS schools. I've also been soccer coach and PTA president, and lots of different other, I mean, we could all talk about our volunteer work. Oh, and I did do some county health stuff with nursing home outbreaks during COVID. I was interested in the transportation efficiencies and creativities, and I went on to sign up for the transportation committee, and then I didn't see there was a transportation committee anymore, so I did this one instead. And I thought, wow, I'm really interested in efficiencies for not just transportation, but libraries and potentially experiential learning between county and APS. And I'm also interested in multi-generational communities. Yeah, so that's kind of where I am.
I'm Tony Weaver. I've been in the Flash area. I live in Shirlington, Fort Bridge, if any of you all know where that is. And I am currently on the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission, the FAC, and the Facilities Advisory Committee, yes, the FAC as well. And I'm vice chair for that, which makes me liaison for JFAC. So that is the capacity that I'm here at, and I'm looking forward to
I'm Kurt Schuler. I'm a recently appointed member of this committee. Before that, I was on Special Education Advisory Committee for 6 years. I have one child who's out of school here for a number of years, and another one who's close to getting out.
Great. And I'm Emily Garrett. I'm the staff liaison for the county. I'm a planner in comprehensive planning. No kids. I do live in Arlington, but yeah.
And our APS staff liaison is Audrey Robinson is on leave, and the person that is substituting for him is on leave, had a conflict tonight. So, do we have anyone that wants to give public comment? Beginning of the meeting. So there's 2 public comment periods. There's a public comment at the beginning and a public comment at the end. Sarah.
Hi, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I can't stay till the end, so I will give a quick public comment right now. Just to say hello, I'm the artistic director of Arlington's Avant-Garde Theater. It's a small professional theater in Arlington, currently operating out of Gunston Black Box. And I'm also the co-president of Embracing Arlington Arts, which is an arts advocacy organization here. And I'm on the Arlington Economic Development Commission, representing arts and culture to that commission. So with that aside, just want to, I know that one thing you might be looking at here is considering a Boston Arts District. And just want to say I'm very interested in that, Embracing Arlington Arts, and Natalie is there, and so is Diana. They both have affiliations with Embracing Arlington Arts. We've been pushing for a performing arts center, a real one in Arlington for a while. So just very interested in hearing about this possibility, and just will be quiet and listen, but thank you for doing it. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? All right, so that means it's the adoption of meeting minutes.
Yes.
Did everyone get a chance to review them? Have any comments?
Look fabulous.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
I'll say yes, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Just as a point, do I have a vote on this or am I just a?
As a liaison, you do not have a vote. And as a general practice for our liaisons, we're like, discussion is between members. And if there's something that you would like to share that JFAC is working on, I mean, that FAC is working on in the beginning, you can sort of email me. And now that I know that you're the liaison, I will include you on the email distribution list for us. But if there's something you would like to share with us in the meeting, I can give you time to do a liaison update. But in general, we sort of limit, if you have a question or something, be okay with that. But we've had an experience before where when it came from, anyway, we're
I'm not going to be that guy.
Anyway, so that's the that is our so
Sure.
and you're welcome to do public.
No.
Yeah. That's so fun. General discussions between members. Voting is absolutely. You're welcome to apply. Okay. So I guess we're moving on to our presentation. I have two presentations this evening of our research on joint facilities in other jurisdictions. So who would like to go first? Is it on the agenda?
No. All right.
It's not on the agenda.
Okay.
So
So
rock, paper, scissors.
We can go first.
Okay.
And I'll give you a second to pull up the slides. So we were tasked to look into Hartford community school system. And so we'll kind of go through, and it's not a particular project, right? The project is the school system being a community school system.
Yeah,
So it's, the kind of the full, like, what does it mean to be a community school? What does that look like for co-location, for joint use, et cetera? So just as sort of general background, Hartford, Connecticut, 3 out of 10 families live below the poverty threshold. So not an affluent area. And so we want to kind of have that in mind when we think about, why that school system maybe embraced community schools and really trying to bridge some of the needs of their students. So do you want to, next slide, I guess? So this is the this was the format you guys remember from the previous presentation. So we can go ahead to the next and we'll just kick it off.
Yeah, that was just all the questions
Yeah.
that were.
Okay, so next slide. Okay, so for some reason I have a hard time reading that, so I'm gonna kind of look on my notes. So they have, so Hartford Public Schools, that's the school system, HPS, all 39 of its schools are considered community schools. And then on top of that, they have what they call a full service community schools model at 13 of the 39 schools. And then in addition, they have what they describe as 3 student success centers at neighborhood high schools. Now, some of the things I'm going to describe are, I'm going to clarify that they aren't necessarily a joint use thing. We're just kind of setting out, you know, how they describe some of their programs. And some of them might be joint, you know, might involve another legal entity. Some of them aren't. So I'll just kind of go through some of the examples. In particular, so like the Student Success Center, that's actually just Hartford Public Schools personnel, and they're just investing extra time and resources for students who are getting off track. So some of this is, you know, marketing, right? Like, oh, hey, we have 3 student success centers. Well, that means that their personnel are doing the extra, you know, going the extra mile for students who maybe are kind of failing or not showing up to class. So, but some of these other things are actually what we might think of as kind of a joint effort. One thing that I wanted to also note, I think this is interesting. So a lot of school systems will operate what's called like a welcome center. You used to call it maybe a registrar, and they used to just have registrars at each of the neighborhood schools. But what they're finding is they need to sort of change some of the terminology and also change the mission and scope. It's not simply checking documents of, okay, yeah, 5th grade, okay, this and that, yes, you live here. Welcome centers often will expand their efforts, including to maybe connect a family with some community resources. And including trying to do a lot more work with possibly translating documents, right? Because you may be having a transcript in another, in, you know, Arabic or something, and the student, you know, is bringing this to the registrar. So they run this welcome center. They actually do not run it in a school building. They chose to put the welcome center in a Class A office building in downtown Hartford. I thought that was very interesting. Our welcome center is in JFAC, I believe, right? Okay, so, you know, is it, I mean, where would be the downtown of Arlington? That's debatable. JFAC maybe is not the easiest to reach with public transportation. Maybe, you know, some bus routes, but maybe not the easiest. So they are trying to really put it squarely in, I think, an easily accessible kind of prominent location, and they're willing to pay rent, you know, in a downtown Class A office building for that. And so again, yeah, Welcome Center, one-stop shop for families, and it includes, yes, enrollment, the traditional function, also, you know, some things like maybe special education testing, trying to give them bus transportation information, but there's also a lot of referrals for external services. Everything from like adult education for maybe the parents, parent training, homelessness services. So that's not quite joint use because it's not like another legal entity is there, but it's definitely bringing in other services from other you know, organizations. Yeah. Okay. Next slide. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So what does it mean, you know, a community school? What does that actually entail? This is kind of the way that they're describing the 4 elements. So you've got various integrated support services through nonprofits, businesses, and higher education institutions. So that's at, you know, like the Welcome Center, it's integrated. Active family and community engagement, expanded and enriched learning, which can include after-school weekends and summers, and collaborative partnerships among parents, students, school administrators, and community leaders. And so for Hartford Public School, they have an Office of Family and Community Partnerships. That group leads the community school and family engagement work. And each school has a dedicated provider for this purpose. That provider, and I'll tell you, a lot of these things are just traditional still school stuff, monitoring student attendance, doing home visits, coordinating parent access to internal and external resources, distributing information, assisting in enrollment, and keeping records of their efforts on parent engagement. Okay, now we're switching to kind of like what other groups are doing. So they work with a couple of nonprofits, and the nonprofits will provide services in the school building. So the Village for Families and Children, very interesting, 200 years old. And it's a nonprofit that's pretty well known and well established in Hartford. They're doing a lot of stuff outside of the schools. And in fact, they're doing things that, although it's not co-located, I think it's interesting that it's not. Like, I mean, they have a mental health crisis center and a quality parenting center that they're open separately. But what they all will do in schools is operate some school-based programs, a mid-level developmental assessment program for children 6 months through 6 years old, sort of a screening process, I think, for a lot of maybe developmental delays and, do you need additional services? Assessment of communication, cognitive, physical, adaptive, social, emotional skills, and parenting development. And then they also provide after-school programs, school-based mental health programs, a teen outreach program, and a family resource center. So this is where you get a little bit more of that on-premises service provision that really, at a minimum, it really reduces one more obstacle or barrier for participation. And, it's worth it. People find that it's worth it. Like, you don't have to transport the kids to somewhere else. It's not an extra step. And that really helps with resource constrained families. Okay, next, thanks. And then there's another group, Connect to Kids, and they provide youth development services also on site. So this is another kind of integrated nonprofit that's actually doing things on premises. One-on-one academic tutoring, individualized mentoring, arts and enrichment programs, and community-based learning experiences. They currently do that at 3 elementary schools and 1 middle school. Finally, and this is definitely the one that's probably fits closest into the bucket of co-location, which is operating an actual health clinic outside, within a school. And so they have 9 schools where they will operate health clinics during regular school hours. And that's physical exams, immunizations, health promotion, medical care for some injuries and illnesses, chronic disease management like asthma and diabetes, reproductive health care at high school sites, and mental health counseling. Next slide. Next one. Okay. Now, with joint funding, like with anything in education, it's messy. There's lots of different funding streams. So I'm not claiming that all of these are, that this is the entirety, but these are some. So you're going to be looking at like state and federal grants, for example, for some of these. So according to their budget, they get about $500,000 from the state for family resource centers, $1.8 million for adult education, $2.5 million for Medicaid reimbursements. That's going to be a lot of the health clinic activity, and 1.15 for Department of Health Services. That's also probably a lot of the health clinic and health promotion. What's interesting, the Connecticut Department of Health, they're really, this is pretty well established across Connecticut to run school-based health centers. So there was legislation that mandated their creation, and actually the first one, I thought this was possibly the reason why it was established in 1982, coming out of a partnership with Yale University, right? So, and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So well-connected, bright people back in 1982 thought, we should do these things differently. Let's start this. And they've been, kind of rolling with that model. It's been working for them. We do not currently have school-based health clinics really established here in Arlington, for example. So it's notable. It's not just to be taken for granted that they're doing this. Another source of the funding, McKinney-Vento Act, that works with a lot for children and youth experiencing homelessness. So, but this will be, this is more, again, falling back into the bucket of the school personnel are doing this. It's not necessarily joint with another group. But that is doing some of their, we're probably, let's see, this might all be stuff that's just squarely in schools. So yeah, assistance for filling out housing support applications and a lot of just tangible assistance that kids need when they're homeless. And then the Department of Education had a grant to support those full service community schools. Those are the 13 for career readiness and crime and violence prevention efforts. And so they're funding a lot of student supports, after school activities, and family engagement. And then they use some federal COVID-19 relief funding for Saturday Academy. So that was some extraneous, effort. And they did work with nonprofits for some of those enrichment activities. Next slide. So let's see, yeah, the grants kind of discussed in the previous, and then of course, the Village for Families and Children and Connected Kids are receiving donations from private sources. But this is not really the public-private partnerships like we've been talking about here in the past. Next slide. So in terms of like saving money, a couple of things. So first of all, obviously their decision to move the Welcome Center out of their own property and into a more expensive, leasing, that's obviously not cheaper, but they think it's a payoff for them. But one area that does kind of save money for the community, right, is having those school-based health centers. They are kind of, proven to reduce emergency room visits and decrease Medicaid expenses. That doesn't affect the school's cost, but it affects the community's cost. And they benefit the schools by reducing absenteeism. And absenteeism actually does cost schools money and, with funding. Next slide. So yeah, the cost recovery, I wasn't like calling them to get their contract. So it's not totally clear when, the actual school system is the contractor for the school-based health center. It's not a private entity. So they are, I don't know how much they are asking the state of Connecticut to offset costs for space in their building and heating and lighting and all of that. I'm not sure. Next slide. So yes, addressing community needs. I mean, that is what this is all about, doing community schools. So facilitating awareness, really reducing those barriers of access, entry and access, and really connecting housing placement, food assistance, adult education, parenting training. It can make a huge difference simply to coach someone through a process so that they don't get intimidated or deterred, even by simple things like, well, I called and it said to press 1 and press 3, and then it hung up on me or something. Like, just simple things like that, having someone reassure them, no, we can do it, press 4 next time on the menu options, whatever, simple things. It can really help connect families in need with services. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the formal agreements, and like I said, the state, Connecticut has a huge number of these school-based health centers, and they will contract with various people. It's not always the public schools to run the health clinic within the school. in this case, both Hartford and East Hartford are the actual contractors. So it's not the, we were asking this question in terms of, yeah, how do you manage an outside entity coming into your space, control and access and all that. In this case, it just didn't really apply because they are the ones that are controlling who's working there and showing up. In other places, obviously, you've got either localities or private entities being the contractor. So, but there's not a need to jointly manage the use of the physical school building in this case. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of challenges, and again, I'm going to focus on the health clinics because that's kind of the part of this that is the most co-located kind of aspect. School calendars. That's obviously a consideration. If school closed for snow days or professional development days, or if students are on field trips, what does that health clinic do? They usually have advance notice so they can make plans. And a lot of times what they'll do is maybe offer telehealth services. For example, psychiatric services outside of regular school operating hours to sort of maximize their service delivery despite maybe the school building not having the regular, being open for access. And then in terms of measurable successes, next slide. So, I'm just citing to the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's not necessarily particular to the Hartford Public School experience, but in general, you've got the student-based health centers, that's SBHC. They do a lot of good. They reduce health disparities, and they really help for children who are underinsured and uninsured. The mental health interventions, even if you are insured, even if your parents are wealthy, it's hard to access behavioral health care as a child. So anything to bring it and focus that availability to students in that school, it definitely increases their access to that. And then also just in general, like the mental health issues, interventions, preventing suicide, preventing bullying, and then as an overall like support for academic achievement. They're really, the schools are held responsible for the outcomes. The schools do not have control over all the inputs and variables. This is a way for schools to get a little bit more involved upstream in some of the variables and inputs that affect a student's ability to learn. If a student is despondent and grieving, they're having a hard time learning, that kind of thing. So can you, at least with the school-based health centers, can the school help, meet those needs so that the student can be better positioned to learn? And then also absenteeism, tardiness, school discipline referrals. Those were definitely some of the issues that the Connected Kids and the Village for Families and Children were working on as well. And then I had one other thing. I don't know if it made it on the slide.
No, that's all. I mean, I'm Vanna White. I can only do what I get, I had 7. Let's see 7, because that's my prettiest PowerPoint. Where is it?
Slide 7.
Yeah, the next one. Yes. I liked it. Yes. I thought, what can I put here? But
Okay,
I have something for here, but you go ahead.
No, you go first.
No, well, so Claire did a great job of just reviewing the entire program. I'd say the Welcome Center, what you can take back for Arlington, a better Welcome Center that's more centrally located, that people can actually plug into, and it's open all the time. So not like the permanent office, like twice a week or whatever, but really it's there for people. So the, making it, I'm not saying that it's really difficult to where it is now, but making something that's much more centrally located that people could get to. Maybe having some satellites in different places for that kind of thing. But the other interesting finding of this, when I was I looked at the funding sources. I mean, this is, I can't imagine they're going to be having so many, such a difficult run of it, because if you looked at where they're getting their money, Department of Education, I mean, that's going to be gone. And that was a serious amount of money. So I thought it was also interesting. And I think the health centers bringing that in to the fold is really important in terms of, I think that's really a value added, even though I get it with the school systems, schedules being off. But I do think the funding piece here was so, if you look at that, where they're all getting it's with the climate now, it's going to be really,
Yeah,
obviously
they're going
visible.
to struggle.
They're going to be struggling. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it's just one of the things that I just came out thinking, wow, under this program's even going to survive. And what was the other thing you were going to add?
So I was gonna add, there's an actual partnership that the public school system is doing with a local nonprofit, and it's called Kenny Park Sustainability Project. And they partnered with them to run a preparation kitchen out of a nearby kind of commercial kitchen space that's like you can rent, stainless steel, clean space or whatever. And what they do is the vegetable garden that this nonprofit grows and harvests food, locally grown produce, and then they partner with the public schools to feed the kids, but it's also accessible on school grounds. So I was looking into that of like, oh, what's that about? It's accessible on school grounds. What does that mean? Like, is it outdoor learning? Is it like right next to, recess or something? And again, some of this is a little marketing because when they say, oh, it's on school grounds, it's actually not located next to a school. So it must be that the property is owned by the school system. It is located on maybe not the most desirable patch of land between an interstate and a towing company, but there's a private school that is working on developing a trail near the garden. And so I think there are efforts being made to use it for some of the outdoor education, either from the private school or also maybe, I don't know if they bus the public school kids in, but it's also near a big park. Kenny Park is just one of the big parks. But the produce is locally grown and feeding the kids. So that is a good circular system that they have partnered and developed with this other nonprofit. So not totally co-located with the building, but school property.
Anybody have any question? Why don't we ask some questions, if you have some questions for them before we move on to yours, and then at the end, we'll allow you.
I'm really curious about how this affected absenteeism rates. What is their absenteeism rate like before COVID, during COVID now, compared to like
I don't know.
Okay, because that's the thing that I'll be really interested
I mean, absenteeism rates in general across the nation are much higher now.
wondering whether the community health centers
That's a good question.
did that.
Question.
I see. Like, did they not dip as much because kids had another reason to be attending school? Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah,
Or
I don't.
with childcare, it's harder sometimes to
Right.
do both.
Yeah, it's a good question to see. Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics does say that school-based health centers decrease absenteeism. I don't have their particular the data behind that, but there's probably a link.
Behavioral health, I think would be the mental health support. Probably likely that.
Yeah, we don't know the numbers.
Yeah,
We have to find that out.
It seems like the supportive families available to. Well, one question I had from a facilities point of view is, you were saying that, some of these weren't actually co-located with the school. Is there a physical, just curious, you might not have the answer for this. I mean, are there schools full? Like, is
I
enrollment?
don't know that it's a space constraint.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, is it a space constraint thing, or, that's one of the things that we're, potentially looking at in Arlington, at least for the short-term forecast, is some additional space in our schools that we want to maintain them
being open. And so how can we utilize them to support communities, support students, would, so just wondering if,
Yeah, I can maybe Google it while.
yeah, I mean, it's just something to kind of think about and eventually we're gonna, at the end of this evening and probably into our next meeting, we're gonna talk about just kind of compiling this research into a letter to the boards and maybe coming up with some, kind of broad recommendations for, or for us to look into things further or just further thoughts. So that was just maybe something that we kind of look into.
Some follow-up thoughts on that. So I can't remember who it was, but someone in the county was talking about the desire for maybe moving some teen health service provision out of, I think it's the building next to JFAC that the county does, but in any event, it's also a location that is not very easy for people to get to. So things like, and parenthood stuff, or not Planned Parenthood because it's county, but reproductive health, all that kind of stuff for teens. And so is there a value in moving some of that into high schools, for example? Of course, the trick is that with our capacity, there might be more space at the elementary school level, not necessarily at the high school level for some of these things. So even, both things can be true. We can have extra space and no space in our high schools.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, Washington, DC, either one of the people that gave the Washington, DC presentation are pretty young, rolled off, and Andy's not here tonight. But when I was looking into the, kind of joint use facilities, Washington, DC actually has health centers in their high schools. For the students to use. And with the opening of the career center, especially
That's
the
true.
bigger building, there will be a surplus.
That's true. That's true.
Or there, I will just say there is a forecast surplus. So,
And that would be a good location in general, or a more prominent, easier access transportation.
What I would mention is, what are the current health services provided by Arlington County that could be moved to schools, number one, and number two, what's in schools? Now, I know high schools have at least psychologists on board. They have 2 psychologists. They also, if you tour the nurse's office, there's they do some family planning and some other stuff in the nurse's offices in high schools. So figuring out what we have now in the high schools and then figuring out what the county has in terms of health services that could be moved to high school.
So
that's-
all of the nurses are county.
Right,
right. And so, in terms of building that space to make it probably more of make appointments, come in and get exams and so on. I don't know how much more space they would need to build that out. Yeah.
So all we're gonna do though, after all these presentations, just take down some of the ideas that sort of rise to the top, like cream of the, and then go from there.
Yeah.
And because there's so much research that would have to be done anyway.
yeah.
And then find out where the capacity is in all the schools.
Right,
And
yeah.
if they're only elementary, what can we do? And
Or
I mean-
normalize certain things.
Yeah.
Look, they're doing it over there.
no, I got it.
Or we're really just sort of
Yeah.
examining what ideas are and looking to see, and then sharing that with, we certainly aren't going to make any decisions or, and we can't direct staff to do any work, but we could say, hey, look, this community school system in Hartford, Connecticut is a
Doing this.
great support system for these communities that need it. And it's a way, these school-based health centers, are a great asset. They support learning, that's,
the ultimate goal of our educational system, right? Is to educate our children. And, you know, the facilities are just to get there. And so how can we best use them to support education? And since they're also county, you know, kind of county funded with our taxpayer money and, you know, and have some county facilities within them. We also have county facilities, joint facilities advisory commission, you know, how can we also use these facilities to support the community? So.
And I would bet, and Kathleen, you can correct me on this assessment. I would bet that APS would say, we are doing community schools in many of our schools.
We have a community.
Okay, but is it just one or is it one officially? Because I feel like we're doing a lot of this. And-
Garland Springs is a community school.
It is.
It's defined as a community school.
Okay, okay,
The one.
okay.
That is defined as. a
I
community
would be curious about what that delta is. I know that Carlin Springs is the only one with a dedicated social worker. So is that like, I don't know what the difference.
Most of our schools have dedicated.
She's like either full-time or maybe she's paid by the county. There's like something unique, but
I can.
I don't know. I think that so APS, maybe the question would be, is there a reason why other schools are not community schools? Like, is it just a threshold of support? Is it,
What does that even mean? I mean, what does it mean for Collins Springs to be a community school? What does that actually mean?
It's 129 days in.
Okay, so seriously, if it's not,
no,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, is
Yeah,
it like
I don't
science focused, says science
No,
focused just
no,
to
no, no, no,
market
no,
that
no.
they're,
No,
even though they
there's
have the same
something else.
curriculum?
No, there's something else.
We can find out.
Yeah,
I mean, like
I
to
think
me,
it's about
Yeah.
funding.
it's something with I agree. It's Stacey. I think
And
it's
it was
something with
s-
funding and
poverty levels or something.
and a certain amount of attention that they get. So additional supports.
so basically free and reduced lunches or,
They have the highest, I think, in the county. It's like.
so does that designate, okay.
Well, that alone may not. And
Right,
there's
that-
certainly
it could
many
be-
other schools.
Yeah, material.
Yeah, that,
It
Yeah.
was
We'll find
established in 2015. So there was,
Is it and it's the only community school?
it's the only, from what I understand, from
Oh.
my conversations with people, it is, but I will.
Well, what is the definition of community school?
Yeah,
What is
that's
it?
that's what I just asked. I have no idea. We don't know what it is and that these are communities, well, yeah,
well, I
not
had
the
a
same.
definition, but it may not be the federal definition.
no, I
It may
get it.
not be APS's definition. It's Hartford Public Schools definition. So,
Really like the food growing eating thing. That's really cool. They could.
well, it's like kitchen of purpose. You could do something in the schools with something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, you could do so many things that
Career center.
make people don't go to class, go to school and not have absenteeism.
So Carlin Spring has a dedicated staff member who coordinates support programs to address out-of-school learning barriers for students and families. I'm not sure whether that's something that other APS
Rated a
doesn't.
very high, rate of absenteeism. I think that was part of.
The rest of what they do seems to be
Yeah.
things that other APS schools are already doing as well.
Encouraging broader involvement from the community, maybe. I don't know.
Here we go. I'm just looking.
No, actually that could be it.
There is I was sent some information about a new community school in North Virginia in a very underserved community, and it was built recently with public-private partnerships, and there's a health center within it. It's kind of privately funded, and I can send the link about it too.
So this dates all the way back to 2003. So let me send you the links here. This is on the Carlin Springs website.
Yeah, I'm on their website.
Having a health center in general, it helps public health. It's not just like helping families. Just as a personal anecdote, when the county offered flu immunizations in school, maybe like 1 or 2 years total. I think it was about 7 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. I gotta tell you, that's the only time my kids have ever gotten a flu vaccine. Like it was, they made it easy for busy, exhausted parents. So it's not just, and that's a public health
Oh,
benefit,
there's-
right?
Yeah.
So it, maybe people like don't just pigeonhole this into like, oh, this is for uninsured students or underinsured students. Public health, making it easy, that's for tired, busy parents.
I certainly didn't have that
I'm gonna send this graphic to you, to our so that you guys can all see this, because this is at the 4 pillars of the community school at Carlin Springs. And this is,
Oh, so I wonder
Yeah.
if it is the same for
and
Ellen.
you're right. Who said the thing about being a neighborhood hub? You said that. Yeah. I'll send it. Yeah, that's all they have up here.
One advantage of having a health clinic at schools is that teachers have a place to go, because sometimes you just have a period where they have free time. And
Oh,
it's really hard for them to get medical care otherwise.
that's really,
But
that's,
they normally have days off during holidays, which
Right.
everyone's, all the appointments are booked, and it's really hard for them to access care.
right, that's a retention benefit.
Yeah, you can't, at elementary school, they can't see the kid though.
And APS has a health clinic, but it's located at JFAC. It's only open during school hours, which is basically useless for the teachers.
Okay.
All right, well, shall we move on to our next presentation?
Great presentation. Tough assignment on GoToNest. In fact, Natalie, could we just use your slide 7 for this part of it?
I sort of copyrighted it, but you can have it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a little hard to dig out some information, so we'll quickly. It is interesting to sort of learn a little bit. So next slide, thank you. This is a school in Santa Ana, California. It's kind of Orange County-ish. And it's was built in 2007. And next slide is it's a high school. It's about 1,800 enrollment. It's a 26-acre site that's shared between the city park and a little museum that keeps changing its name. But that was one of the sort of joint use aspects of it, were the fact that they collaborated to assemble enough land for the school on this site. So it's about 20 acres. That came from the park. The city wanted the park to be redeveloped. The museum wanted a buffer between themselves and an industrial area, which the school became a buffer. So that's one of their claims of fame. And then their sharing of uses. So next slide. It's really about 60,000 square feet out of the total 260,000. Space is joint use, and so it includes gymnasium, the performing arts complex with the auditorium, which also includes a workshop and black box theater, and then a number of flex spaces. So this is really oriented more towards the arts. And then it had a design concept that was touted, which is kind of a main street that they called a Zocalo, which Zocalo is actually more of a square, not a street, but it sounds nice, and a big parking garage. So the next slide.
Big place.
So 2006 was the cost. It really had zero information about kind of cost recovery, and some of the original kind of impetus for the school. You could tell there was a lot of excitement when it first started, and one wonders how successful the integration is, 18 years later, and where that's gone. And really what the only, after hours and hours of searching around for information on this thing, just what came through was there's this company called Facilitron that is the kind of a
Property manager.
property manager that helps with reservations and payments for use of space, which is, it's actually an interesting finding.
So like the theater gets rented out to the community?
Yeah, apparently you can reserve this. I tried to go on the website and see if I could
Reserve it?
try to reserve a space, but I had to log in and all kinds of stuff, so I didn't. But next slide then. So, Facilitron was, I think, a local parent in Santa Ana that founded this. They were having trouble reserving facilities. And so they created this platform, and this platform sounds like they have quite a bit of capability to help districts manage their facilities. Sort of a one-stop shop that helps coordinate all the scheduling, which was identified as a significant problem. And I went on, they didn't have anything in Virginia, but they have Facilitron facilities in Pennsylvania and kind of all over the country. I think there might be one or two more slides on this portion of the presentation. This is the boring part. So, originally there was an agreement between the Santa Ana School District and the city and this Heritage Museum. The Heritage Museum touted that they were able to get access to certain labs and spaces, research space inside school. It wasn't really clear if that's still ongoing or if that's was successful or not. Really Google the Heritage Museum, which changed its name 3 times since the school was built. So it might be that its mission has changed substantially, and the school is really only a buffer to them from the warehouses. And I think there might be one more slide on the design concept. Again, this isn't somewhat interesting. They clearly were dealing with the issues of how do you manage joint use when you have kids there during the day, and how does it transform? So the idea of this main street was pretty neat. It became an outdoor space, of course, in California that kids would use with food carts during the day. It was able to be fenced off at the ends so that the public didn't have easy access to it during school day, but then it became kind of a farmer's market and outdoor space, gathering space when the theaters were being used. And so that seemed like a nice kind of way of managing separations and ability to sort of, section off parts of the property for these joint uses between school day and weekend, evenings, et cetera, which I know astute members of this committee have talked about in the past. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Diana.
I just wanted one footnote on yours, that scheduling. I don't know how widespread it is in Arlington and how many sort of use systems there are, but I will have to say that tennis courts, they do a great job at scheduling. So I don't know if that's something that can be like that's broader and like the
These guys.
No, us.
Oh, us,
Arlington.
us.
Natalie would
Play
know.
tennis, right?
Yeah, I do.
So have you ever scheduled
Pickleball
online?
now.
Okay. Did you ever schedule online, or do you just
I
go?
have, but I usually go yeah.
So it works really well, and you can do like Arlington residents sign up various time slots. So it depends on the what you're looking for the joint use, but some of Arlington has that, so that might be something that could be of interest, or it could be something that Arlington already has that can be more widespread. But
For better.
Point of reference, Natalie was like school tennis coach.
I
When
knew
she-
you had tennis.
showed up.
Yeah.
When what? When your daughter, yes.
When you showed up.
No, I shut up all the time.
Yeah,
But,
we have a lot of tennis
our-
courts. They're good.
County Board Liaison Susan Cunningham has talked about this frequently, that it is for county facilities, they do have a very good reservation system. If you want to reserve a room in a community center or a library or a tennis court, there is an online process to do that. But she says going from counties to schools, like the libraries wanted to use the school's auditoriums And it's almost impossible to get them because the school's auditoriums are bigger and, like, you know, is there a way that something like the Facilitron could help with that? I mean, I know that the schools are used very frequently for after-school activities by community groups and scouts and, you know, kind of other, you know, basketball and, you know, but there are community centers in some of our community center spaces in some of our schools. So could that also be used for, you know, kind of reserved for other space? You know, is there a way that we can facilitate?
Yeah, we
think that you can do that
what, there's reserving
Fill
space.
out a form and beg someone.
Yeah, and it's through the principal and not through a, you know, it's, you know, it's kind of the same thing, like having a, you know, when I first started looking at these joint uses, there's a thing called a joint use agreement. We have talked about this before, like that is system wide. And it's, as it is right now, we have MOUs with at individual schools, memorandums of understanding at individual schools. And it isn't consistent throughout the system. And so
So the county has MOUs with the schools. Okay, but it's not broader than
you know,
just
it's
the
like
two
individual
entities.
schools,
Okay,
so there's an MOU.
But
Yeah.
even then,
And
it is begging.
yeah, it's sort of like who's the primary in the building.
The principals kind of maintain control of their own building, so that
Right.
if they want to do an
They
event,
do.
like
That's
something,
true.
they maintain. And so some principals will let you and others won't, like, or I don't know. It's
I mean,
just-
and by you, it includes like libraries, parks.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
County stuff.
county staff. Yeah.
I mean, and I think certainly as an advisory commission, we, you know, I think our role is to sort of look at, are there examples that might help facilitate something like that, that could be, that the counties and the schools could look at, you know, not.
Yeah.
That would, you know, offer more services to the community and also that may benefit. So,
Now,
and just one quick question about the, high school here.
Imagine
Do the high school students use the theater and all?
Yes,
So
that's
during
from,
the day?
as far as I can tell, yeah.
they use it and then the community also signs up.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like everything, I think the last, you know, since 2020, like all bets are off, but I think, yeah, as we move toward normalization, it seemed like right away. I mean, you read the thing. It's like, seemed like.
No, it sounds good. It just sounds, they sound like, well, who knows, but it sounds like one-stop shopping makes a lot of sense in terms of because I think that's what's really needed. Because even though the tennis online is great and I can look up and find out where I can go play pickleball inside and all that stuff, there's not one place that you can really go. So when you come, you know, if you're new to the county, it's really difficult to sort of navigate around. So I just think,
Oh, I think we're talking about two different things.
yeah, we are talking about,
Property and one is reservation systems and coordinating.
yeah, I'm just talking about overall navigation. But yeah, I was curious about the theater because we're lacking theater space here, big time in the county.
Somehow Gunston does both. They use their auditorium and the community uses their.
They do, but there's just a struggle because there's a lot of need, there's a lot of
Oh, yeah.
interest. And the same thing with Jefferson.
Yeah.
You know, my kids used to go for ballet, you know, for the performances, but it's tough to get space. And the county really needs some kind of performance space, as Sarah was saying.
All right, so we looked at the school. Brian obviously did all the slides on that. And then we looked at Arlington, what we have, and they built a campus. And they have actually, I did look at some comparisons. Their square miles of the county is just about the same as Santa Ana and Arlington. Population density, I think, is about the same, but they did have this large green space that they wanted to develop. And this gets to well, there are a number of different models, but that would be sort of, we build this campus. The other is we bring the arts to what's already existing. So I think Sarah referred to, and this is sort of morphed into this, let's look at, can we look at areas and sort of what's in that area? Can we have more intensive, like, since we're focused on arts presence, so this is Quincy side. I mentioned earlier, there was a property down the street from me that I looked at, and there were art buses parked on it, the Arlington Rapid Transit. Those are all gone now, so breathe a sigh of relief on that. Thanks, Susan Cunningham, for pushing that. But so the buses are gone, but in terms of the use of the property, there wasn't a good sort of vision for it, and I didn't know that until I started having these conversations. So this is the Quincy site. It's in the middle of there. It has 4 buildings. It's had some very ad hoc uses. It was purchased by the county in 2015. And part of JFAC was part of the process of just advising on whether or not it was appropriate to purchase this property. So it had a bunch of other uses. I know it was a postal sorting facility, and there was just maybe a martial arts school or something. It was just a bunch of different things, but it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It's right along 66, as you can see. And the street to the left there is Quincy Street. And on the other side of that street, directly across the street, is Washington Liberty. So obviously a high school has a broad range of things, including a really nice auditorium. And then to the other side, there's a small park, Hayes Park, and then across that street is Science Focus School. So that sort of gives you a orientation in terms of the site and the schools. And this is what I was looking at in my sort of initial looking at.
And there's also the bus, you said this already, buses are there.
The buses are gone.
Yeah.
So the
Are they
buses
gone now?
are moved as of maybe a month ago.
Oh, are they gone?
Yeah.
I thought they were still there.
Nope.
Okay.
So what's there is,
What is there?
so turn the page. So the current operations, this is slightly outdated because the buses aren't there and they're circled, but it's basically become storage. So what was ad hoc use sort of has been sort of ad hoc to maybe this is medium term, and there's been storage for like fire trucks. They rarely used fire equipment, but that means like bomb squad truck and really large fire equipment. And then there's some, so it was as described initially, it seemed like it's going to be a lot of storage for police and fire department, and there's some like public health on there, but it was morphing into, so the last CIP, there was money in there for converting the first building over on the left there into a fire department logistics center. So it would be the large equipment there and then the logistics. And the issue, and the rest of it quite frankly right now is pretty much storage. So I thought there was more there, and as the county was describing it, it's pretty much storage. So the issue that I saw was with the buses, with all this, like this is a very high value property. It is walkable to 2 metros, it's multiple bus lines, it's, it's just, it's a high value property. So storing large equipment there and other things, it seems like it would be more person friendly, better used, more a higher value use of the property, so that we don't have either, some people, you can have offices, but if the whole thing is just like people go to their office and they leave, like it would be nice to have a way to invite more people here.
Mhm.
And because the proximity to both the schools, it seems key that there be an APS use on the site, because I know we're talking about excess capacities in the schools, and Washington Liberty, they did build out, and this is sort of later in the slide. So we did current uses, so that's the next slide.
There's, the neighborhood, there's people there who want to park.
Yeah,
Lots of stuff.
right.
Lots of things that people
Yeah,
are
so
screaming for.
so everyone wants a park. Everyone wants a park in their neighborhood. I would love a park. There's a park on the other side of 60.
I'm not saying it's all, that's a huge piece of property.
It's a huge piece of property. So I think it's, and we'll sort of go through, but this is sort of the current uses is very much, very ad hoc. And then looking at it, so if we turn the slide, this is what I started talking about. It's Washington Liberty, they built out a bunch of seats and had a lot of extra capacity. And now even with all of the sort of families moving away from Arlington, and the lower number of students in schools, at least currently, I do think as we watch people go back to the office, my prediction, not, we'll look at what the numbers do, but my prediction, people will start coming back, like the families that moved out to wherever will want to sort of move back to have a closer commute. But it's already at 94% of capacity utilization, and there's a lot of growth along the metro corridor there, the Roslyn, Boston, and also Langston Boulevard now has been growing, and now there's a plan to grow it even more. So that's, the key areas where it's going to grow. And the other side of there, science focus, that is actually at 112% capacity utilization. It has 6 relocatables there still. So that, I hadn't focused on it first. I was focused on the high school, but science focus already has a need. So, again, we prioritized various things when we went through that process. That might have higher priority needs, but certainly looking at this property, it's so unique because being so close to the schools and right in between them, that I think most people feel, well, I'm sure the school system wants this, but also the neighbors think that they are most open to park and or schools use because it's consistent with what has been in the neighborhood. And, looking at this from a land use perspective, if this is taken for some other purpose and the schools grow, then you have to find another location for a school, and they could use services, they could share services if they were on this property, as opposed to just finding another location for a school. Centrally located bike lanes, surface parking, there's a parking structure across the street. It is state owned, but it is rarely used. It is sometimes used by teachers. It is used by a church that's on the street.
Wait, which parking structure?
So it's on,
It's right next to
On top of
W&L.
66.
Yeah.
That is packed.
That's packed.
is it really? I've never seen it packed.
Yeah,
packed.
it's fully.
Okay.
And buses come in there too, and
Okay.
kids use it. But
Interesting.
but there was an idea floated to green it over. That you could do something that would be really interesting, like your 15-minute city, green it over for a field. I mean, there's things that you can do there too,
Yeah.
but it's full.
To an interstate.
Yeah,
air
at the well.
pollution.
Well, it's
During
looking at
school
some kind of
days.
green roof, but
Yeah.
it's definitely busy.
And
Yeah.
were you mentioning park or parking lot?
I mean, most neighborhoods, I think, would say we want a park.
There's a park right there.
There is a park right there. So I think
Because you've got one
Yep.
here, you've
Yep.
got,
No, but the
and
neighbors,
across
the
66.
neighbors who are on this, where there was a big lawsuit because of the buses there. There's not, the people who are backed up onto that property,
yeah.
the old Bug property.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what yeah. So the neighbors, all those people at Virginia Square, they were very upset and still, about what's going on with that property.
We still own a house there.
I'm sorry.
I said, we still own a house there. I totally missed.
Oh, you missed the lawsuit? Oh, it was a lawsuit because of the bus. The bus depot.
My parents still have a house.
Oh. Anyway. Sorry.
You know, learn something new.
There's been some controversy related to the use of the property. I'll leave it there. But so, I mean, that's another reason to try and find something that is consistent with the characteristics of the neighborhood. So I looked at this and said, we all look at where did we move? Things change. The county is growing. The county will change. But if you put something there that is so dramatically different, it does create issues with the neighbors, the neighborhood, and can create things like the bus traffic, which, for the neighbors right there, that was really problematic, the noise. But you look around and there was additional bus traffic. I mean, I'm on, in that area, it didn't really affect me, but anything you put in there, you will have to look at things related to it. But I think I did go to a Boston, Virginia Square meeting and actually did it online. And they did indicate that they were most open to schools use. So again, that depends on the details. And having green combined with schools, I think would be an appropriate long-term vision for the property. So something, and again, keep in mind, it's, it's a plan that needs to be developed. So
Can I ask a basic question? we have departed from the Santa Ana
Yep.
discussion. Is this part of that? I'm confused. Sorry.
This is sort of an application to Arlington. So I
But-
think we were looking at,
Are you
how do we?
proposing something?
So yes,
Yeah, I mean,
yes, so we'll get
yeah.
to there.
And
So I think I'm good. I'll flip through these. So I deemed it like it's a center of education. Can you find something related to that?
No, I do think this question is relevant though, because
Yep.
like this was a research project on other jurisdictions because
Yeah.
that was sort of within
I will get to the link.
our,
I will
our
get to the
scope.
link.
And I feel like by you presenting us this, that you are, I mean, what is your ultimate goal in presenting this information to us as part of this transportation? I mean, as part of this presentation for the presentation in California.
So let's step back a minute. The assignment that we got was to look at this Godinez school. And it was focused on the arts and performing arts, particularly I think the performing arts. So that is the tie, because my initial thought for this property was a performing arts school. And again, it's, what do you do? How does that work? And I
Lead with that next time.
Okay.
It's just been really mean.
Too many details. No, that's
No,
great.
it's just like not clear. Okay, so you're thinking something like the school in Santa Ana would be beneficial to have here in Arlington in general. And then on top of that, you're thinking, aha, we have a space, for example, Quincy.
Correct.
Okay.
So there, and I think there are two different, well, it's not, it doesn't have to be dichotomy, but there are two different, like they built a campus. This could be like we incorporate the campus in so-called Boston, Virginia Square. So good question. Back up for a minute. Yeah, and I would have to say this was my application to JFAC, and there's been interest. And I think a lot of different neighborhoods are interested in it. And it's a matter of, okay, do we have funding? Obviously, that's key. Do we have, there's a difference between, we don't need seats right now. Some schools we do, some we don't necessarily. Where do we need it? And is specialized use of properties. So one of the things about performing arts schools are we don't have, it's like a Duke Ellington, which DC has. We don't have one here. So there's at the high school level. So we have some good ones at elementary, and then Kenmore for middle school, I think has been generally viewed as the sort of arts for middle school. So there's a gap at the high school level, and started scoping because of course I know the schools and learning a lot here. So going through here, and I think the other thing that I incorporated is school for the performing arts, but also a community center. So that's one thing as we look at joint uses. If you had performing arts school and an arts focused community center, and if you could somehow configure a property where some of it might be APS only, some of it might be county, some of it might be joint. And I'm hearing all these issues about joint usage. So like that is a point very well taken. But I think they grappled with some of that out at Godinez in Santa Ana. And I think that's something that hopefully we will do a better job of. It sounds like overall in Arlington, but certainly if we design something like this, one of the benefits of doing like a performing arts school is, and I can walk through a little bit more in terms of why I think Boston would be great, but funding. So funding for arts is could be Arlington County, it could be Arlington Public Schools, but it's also definitely an opportunity for public-private partnerships. So either funding the initial building or funding ongoing for programs or additional personal space or studios could be very attractive options for sponsors from the private sector. And again, I have no experience in developing these types of public-private partnerships, but it's something where there's definitely an interest. I've heard, a lot of conversations about, oh, we want it over here, and that's in part why.
I know that we hear often the response, channeling staff here, we don't need public-private partnerships because our bond rating is so good that we don't need them. Like,
Oh, yes, we do. And there's also this, is there an investment in a building and then we turn over the keys and we have our name on it, or,
Why wouldn't we at least explore that? I mean, I think this is interesting.
Yeah.
And I think I appreciate it. I mean,
where
as a
would
member of this group, I think I
fire-
appreciate it.
like, this was something that definitely you remember and I remember first coming up. Where would you propose the current equipment go?
So the equipment has been, I think, most of it down in Trade Center. So they have a fire department training academy down there, and they've had a lot of large equipment there. And I know, and this was when I first looked at this and was learning about this with the CIP, they're developing the, I can't remember, situational awareness unit on the 6th floor. Is it in this building? So this was, I think, more than anything, if an emergency happens and it's a large one, some of the personnel will be here already. And I think the police department headquarters is very close. And then the fire department didn't have something similar. So when I looked at that, I said, well, shouldn't the fire department chief, well, I can't, the chief marshal, I'm not sure what his title is, shouldn't he have an office, at least an office presence here? So that you have a situational awareness unit, but then you also have, they wanted, then the answer came back, they need a redundant site. So I said, okay, I hear what you're saying. I think that makes total sense. We need, we need to be prepared for emergencies, but this is, in terms of, hopefully it never happens, but if it does, hopefully it's not very frequent. There are other areas in Arlington that might be appropriate. So if the fire department training academy is already out there and all the facilities to do maintenance on the trucks, including the police cars and the fire department equipment is out there. Fire department training academy is out there. It sounded like they had some additional needs that they might have for their training academy and other aspects of it. But it seems like moving all that to this property instead of looking for the right solutions there and finding something that is a good long-term solution in that property would make a lot of
Where
sense.
big is this space?
I'm not sure. In terms of acreage, I knew it at some point, but I forgot.
Has anyone reviewed, I can't remember the top of public, the trade center optimization study?
I think it was talked about in the CIP, but it was, I think,
we glimpsed it.
I mean, but they talked about, it was like had a $300 to $400 million price tag on it. I mean,
But part of that was for bogus reasons. So,
anyway, I think,
but that's like, I'm just saying,
yeah.
like, what did they even, like, is this a study we're never gonna see?
I think they did fund the studies.
I thought it was
think
already out.
Both the
Did we?
counties
Just haven't released
I
it.
didn't see it.
I have not seen it. I have not.
I
heard,
think,
but
and I
have
think
to-
that's the sense of what I'm gathering is, there's also the property where the buses were that is now being vacated for the new property. So that's another one, which quite frankly, if you're looking at emergency situations, you're close to the airport. So if it's a true, area-wide emergency, you have a different types of things available there that you wouldn't have in this area.
I mean, can we kind of just
Okay.
zoom out
Yeah,
here?
can we zoom out, but can we say, could this be part of our brainstorming? That this is something to look at, to explore, to look.
well, I
at?
think-
On top.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Really?
think,
Well,
I think there are
okay.
aspects of this that we can, I think, look at as part of our brainstorming. But I think we should be careful in presenting this research as focusing on
One side.
one site.
Okay.
And a site that, as a group, the research has just been done by one member and we haven't been presented. So I'm gonna just zoom out here and zoom out and say, I think, what we can look at with this is that, so I have heard from Susan Cunningham that there is going to be some comprehensive planning for the Quincy site coming up within the next
5 years.
5-10 years. And she wants to tie it to
Yeah.
the central library site and that, big field space, the baseball field next to the central library is actually owned by APS. So it has, it's WNL owned. So, so I think one of the things that I think is a very important piece of JFAC is integrated planning. So we don't just look at one site, we look at how is the trade center site planning integrated with the Quincy site planning. And I think sort of us making a recommendation that, okay, when you're looking at the trade center planning, can you also consider, is there space for these current uses that are on the Quincy site that we might, that could, is having those storage places kind of the best long-term use for that site? Or, can those storage trade center, can that trade center studies also include potentially, studying space for these, kind of moving these needs around? Because one of the critical things in Arlington is that we have limited space, and we need to make the best use of it, kind of long-term and planning. And I think, the points that you make about like it being in between the schools and the park and the neighbors and then, what the neighborhoods desire, I think are very valid, and I think really good points to make. But I'm not sure they're appropriate to make when we're presenting research into other jurisdictions and best uses.
What about? Just quickly, it used to be that the JFAC, Kathleen had wanted to really undertake a facilities master plan.
Yeah.
So it seems like this conversation is directly related to the notion that optimizing joint use, looking at land and sites that we have really would be a facilities master plan that would be the appropriate thing for the county to undertake. So Kathleen, sorry, I'll stop it. She was very disappointed that that initiative was shut down. So I think we're having this conversation over and over and over again.
We are.
And at some point you wonder, what's the use?
And I keep trying to find, and that's part of at least my purpose in these researches, and kind of asking for, what are these joint use agreements? Like, how are the agreements working in these other jurisdictions? How are these joint uses managed and funded in these other jurisdictions? How do they benefit? Is to also try to find ways, because I, like Kathleen, is very disappointed. I really fundamentally believe that some kind of codified joint use agreement between APS and the county, how they plan land use planning, is really important for the future. And given that this sort of the formal public facilities master plan has been shut down, I feel like the research that we do as,
Which is ridiculous, but yeah.
can help us maybe make a better public facilities thing in the future, whether it's like using things like the Facilitron, APS and the county using Facilitron, or it's a joint use agreement instead of this, maybe we don't need to be a part of the comprehensive plan. Maybe we just have a countywide joint use agreement. Maybe there are other ways of getting at it instead of, and that's why I feel like that's where I see the value in doing these in researching these other jurisdictions and other joint uses. I think it also gives us, if you get an idea about what's out there and how it's benefiting a community or a school, like the senior center, how it benefited that senior center that was adjoined to the high school, like how that, added to this, like created this great place for the seniors, but it also benefited the students, and it, saved the county and the schools money when they built that facility.
Even Claire and Natalie's, presentation, one thing that rang through was just the comprehensiveness of it, and the coordination and that kind of holistic aspect of how it was
But keep in mind, one entity is. So it's not joint.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of joint negotiations. And I mean, to me, I think looking at Arlington's history of joint use buildings, they are not the most desirable buildings right now. They are not maintained at the highest rate level.
Is that true whether or not they are, it's who owns the property, who owns the building? Is it?
When you have shared, when you have like, like literally joining roofs and buildings and like responsibilities, it doesn't seem like either one prioritizes.
So
investment.
that's two separate things, though, right? Joint use versus joint ownership.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can have joint use with single ownership.
Right, but I think joint use is still that one person is in charge. And they are agreeing to let you on their,
Well,
or building, let you on, right? Is that,
well, and I want to step back and apply this again, because one thing I know when I talked to Susan, she did want, she was part of the group when the Quincy site was purchased. So that was something that she had wanted carryover to some degree. And then I think looking at this, it's not just the proximity to the schools, it's also the proximity to performing spaces. So the high school has a very nice theater that's 800 seats. So you can look at that and say, you know, can everyone use that? No, probably not. If you train all sorts of musicians and performers, they can't all use that. It's in a school. So the school is going to be primary. Could it be used by some of the groups? Absolutely. We're talking about this, but there are other performance spaces very close by. So you have like George Mason has an auditorium that's 300 seat. You have Central Library has a 180 person one that they use for like Arlington Reads, Children's Theater. So some of this could be Marymount University has a 150 seat style auditorium. And then Embracing Arlington Arts, as Sarah mentioned, is looking for a place for a black box theater. So all of this could be sort of disintermediated, for lack of a better term. So if you're looking for a performing arts school and you have, you know, anticipated need in that area, you have this performance space that's nearby that would be very expensive to build if you had to build from scratch. So it's taking the godiness concept, but saying, okay, maybe here's an urban version so that we don't have to build spaces. We can, instead of the 66 million was 2006, I think. So we're 20 years later, but if we're not building, we don't have to build, if we didn't have to build the parking structure, we didn't have to, build all these things. And maybe the Socolo concept is you have a school, you have in between those buildings, you have sort of park and school, but then you have in Ballston, you have other areas where you can either have, performance or you can have dance. There's some like the George Mason Square I saw has, they show movies. And so a lot of this can be built on, we're training here, we're developing here, maybe we have a studio here, but we have exhibition spaces. And that's, I learned how to put pictures into this PowerPoint. So I had a lot of pictures here where it's like we have a Museum of Contemporary Art. We have all these things in the Ballston, Virginia Square area. So if you focus on that and saying, okay, you have these things, sculpture created at this school and this studio, and then you have a place where you can, very close by display it. You can put that anywhere in the county, but here are spaces that are very conducive to this. You have also with the performance spaces, if you had like the Black Box Theater there, you have other performances at these spaces, it helps the restaurants. So you have people that are coming to the neighborhoods, that are using the neighborhoods, they're already built for public transportation, for traffic. So that's, I think, sort of bringing it to a higher level. So getting me out of the weeds. And thank you for sort of like reminding me why I started looking at the Quincy site and started thinking about this and talking to people and saying like, okay, I had this idea. Where does it go?
why not look at the Trade Center site?
I think
Arlington and for
That's where the
equity.
buses are now, right?
Well, for equity reasons.
But I think the
Part of the
issue is if you put, so Signature is a nice theater, and you have a theater there, that's true. But if you're trying to bring people from all over the county and for schools and making a community, and I know others have wanted community centers that are closer to, I think Maureen mentioned this, wanting community centers that are close to the metro so that they're very accessible and vibrant areas. So it sort of combines the best I agree, that space could use something that's more vibrant, but I think for this, it wouldn't necessarily, you have the metro, you have all these other things where people could come from South Arlington, get metro, you could have people, all over the county. Because I know when I first mentioned this, people said, "Oh, Yorktown's going to be the art school," and I was like, "Okay, we're centrally located," and they were like, "Oh, we'll build. You don't have the space. Oh, we'll build out." And I said, "What are you going to build? A metro?" I think there's like all sorts of things here where maybe it's not a performing arts school. Maybe, but I do think it should be something APS oriented, and I think this is an idea worth considering because of all the benefits to the community of having something, can't call it like a Duke Ellington, we wouldn't if we developed a Arlington School of the Arts and Performing Arts. But we have a model close by. We have another model that we've looked at. There are many across the country. I think it does bring something. We have the Career Center for Vocational, and I think this brings something like that. My first thought was we move all of I called them electives. They're now part of the curriculum, but across the street, vocational and arts. And then I learned about the Career Center. So I think it's like trying to find something that fits the property and helps Arlington, and also make sure that it's used so that if you bring it to somewhere where nothing exists and you build all this campus, it seems great. But if people can't get there from other areas in Arlington, and if people can't then go to like the performance space that is like most appropriate. So I think the Black Box Theater would be a complement to the existing performance spaces. It would be great if it could be there.
But there was supposed to be a Black Box Theater in Virginia where that funeral home used to be.
Yeah, in that building, I heard that.
That went
I
bust.
mean, I think what you're doing is making a very good argument that one of the joint uses that we recommend is arts. And I'm
Yeah.
fully supportive of that. I mean, I think we also have to we have some can the arts go in some of our existing buildings? And I think especially now we're looking at huge, budget shortfalls and, kind of very uncertain revenues coming in the future. We have we lose a lot of our federal workforce here in Arlington. Will we lose some federal funding in education? I think we have to be very mindful, especially, of what we're recommending in going in for debt service or, I think I'm absolutely supportive of saying a joint use in as we look to the future for using for building sites or for using existing space, art schools. I would say as chair, I'm not comfortable saying JFAC is going to recommend using a particular site based on this presentation.
Yeah. And I don't think anyone was, I don't think we did that with any of the other.
No, but you can say we got that information.
So
Yeah,
I think it's more like we had a discussion. We think this is, and I welcome questions. I think these are good questions, like why they are, why, and I think the cost savings is an important component of that. So we have, 800 seat theater across the street, which has an upgraded sound system as of, I don't know, a couple years ago. And so I think those are the things where it was like all combining to say, okay, is now the time.
And I think through your research that you've done when the site planning happens in several years and if bonding capacity opens up or there is a need to build these, start to look out that site. I think this research is very relevant and I don't disagree with any of it in terms of what you're recommending but I think we're looking at now, we have, what are the community needs in Arlington? There are, when we got the demographic information last year, the two demographic groups that were growing were 18 to 24. So it's sort of, or the 24 to 28, like the young single people and people over 70. And every other demographic group had declined in population. They were still growing, but the growth was happening there, and it was not happening with young families. It was not happening with students. So as we were looking at county facilities as well, are we looking to also provide services to young people and, people over 70? And, are those services in a place where those people can access? And also, are the services for schools, in area, are the facilities where schools are in a place where they can be accessed to? And, and so I think we need to look at this sort of the big picture in that. And what joint uses provide support to schools, and I think arts definitely do, but I just will say I'm not comfortable with just focusing in, on one site at this point with this project, and we have taken up a lot of time talking.
And I was going to say, and it's not, I mean, people of any age can use studios, can use art instruction, can learn acting, so that's the community center. And I do think it would take some planning. I don't know the acreage on the site. I don't know the size of the architect. So I don't know exactly how much of it might be. Here's the performing arts school. Here are studios that, I think dance has been identified as one area that there could be some additional space that could be very beneficial. Filming. So like, I think scoping would be important, and then would that be better in some other site? I think the benefit of this, and I'm not saying that JFAC should necessarily make this recommendation. I think, considering it in the near term, because there's $6.5 million allocated toward the first building on we won't go back to the map, but the first building near Quincy Street. And it's $6.5 million expenditure to build out this fire department logistics center. So, and that is a 56% cost overrun of what was supposed to be on that building when it was designed for a medium-term use. So they're saying, okay, we had ad hoc use, the buses are gone. We're going to look at this as, maybe we'll have, but if we start building out, we start spending money like that. I think in the CIP, there was like $16.5 million they were spending on the site. Sort of my sort of take on this, and I think I've talked about this too, is like, if we're spending these chunks of money, doesn't make more sense to do long-term site planning first. So, so the 6.5 million is more than 20%.
But that's also balancing the needs of the rest of the county too,
Yep.
and sort of maintaining other facilities, maintaining our water mains, and
Yeah.
all of the other things. And so it's like, okay, well, we can't do long-term planning on this right now because we don't have the bonding capacity, and we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the need, we don't have the space need. So, but we have to maintain these facilities right now because that's what we have to hold that fire thing. And so, I mean, I think we have to keep looking at it long term. Yes, that's a lot of money, but like we just had to spend $5 million to replace the roof in the central library that absolutely needs work, but we can't let the library in the garage like collapse onto people. But we do have to do long-term planning, but.
So we've got 10 more minutes. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I think we had another discussion.
Well, what we were going to discuss was, and we can do it next month, is kind of bringing the research of these 5 joint uses in other jurisdictions, kind of bringing in like, what are the main takeaways from all of them? Is there anything valuable in there that we think that we can apply, that we could, it doesn't even need to have to be a recommendation, but that we could bring forward to the attention of our board members. Say, hey, look, we thought this was a really interesting idea, or these school-based health centers were really helpful, or the facilitron thing in terms of coordinating all the spaces, like that may be that may be something that's worth looking into. So, and I kind of bringing it in so that we can write a letter, to present this research to the boards, because I think some of them
It's good. It's good.
will
research.
find it
I'm
interesting.
sorry I missed the previous ones, but, I learned quite a bit, so it seems like there's some merit transmitting it in some way.
Yeah, and the ones last month were, or in November, it's been a while, were, so there was a high school that was a joint use with a senior center in Massachusetts. It's a really interesting thing. And then Wells and
Is he in New Zealand now? Is he here?
I don't know. Is he gone? I don't know. Well, he did not renew his term, so we don't have Wells.
Somebody told me he's gone.
And Alex Cusmano did a research on a joint use of a public housing with an elementary school in Arlington, New York, where they rebuilt on a kind of, it was an empty lot. And that was a really interesting presentation. There were lots of public-private partnerships that were funding that. And it created a public housing right next to an elementary school. And then we had just a big community center in Washington, D.C. that Andy and Steve Young researched that had just a range of different uses within the community center. There was a health center, there was a pool, there was, kind of all of these different things. So, when we're talking about joint uses, it's not just counties and schools, it's also how many different services can we put into our community centers? Are we making the best use of our community centers as well? Like, could we put more joint uses in our, could we put health centers in a community center? To make that access to more people.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but you mentioned there might be other business before 9, but I guess at some point, I think it would be useful for the committee to kind of hear, what's the trajectory for the year? It sounds, I don't know if you're no longer going to be chair, who would be the new chair? How is that selected? Planning commission has formal ways of electing chairs.
Right.
My term's up, I'll probably roll off, but it seems like it's probably a fruitful conversation in there somewhere to see what's up for the next.
Well,
And you don't have to do that tonight,
that's a good
just
question.
putting that on the.
We have a few minutes.
That's a lot of time.
That's a good question. That is still in progress. We're working on recruiting. I met with Susan and Kathleen last week, and we're working on recruiting some members. And working on placement B, because I roll off in May, so I will be here until May. And then, finding a vice chair and a chair. I'd like to find someone that has a broad county, has some experience in county. Anyway, we're working on that. But it's still a work in progress. As far as short-term plans, until May, at least, but my hope is, I think in December or November, we might have talked about, or the last couple of years in February, the February meeting, we've gotten the demographic information. We got the information, we get the county demographics, population as a whole, and then we get the school enrollment. That I found out is we need to push that till March because the county wants to wait to make sure that we have this most updated census data. But I think that information is really valuable, and I hope to this year also kind of because I realized last year during the CIP presentations that JFAC is really the only body that's getting both the county demographics and the schools projections. And, you know, that's like 15 people in all of Arlington that actually see it. And so I want to try to get it, whether it's through a public comment, you know, at a school board meeting or a county board meeting, or have a 2x2, have 2x2 meetings with the boards, just to share that information with them, making sure that they're seeing both. You know, that the county board is just not seeing the county demographics, the school board is not just seeing the school board, because they both matter to each other. So that will happen in March. So I guess in February, we can talk about pulling together this research information. And, you know, I'll write up a letter. And then in March, we have, we'll get the demographic information. And then we have April and May. And I hope my thought was to, because there's been a lot of talk about joint transportation and kind of because of the budget constraints and sort of saving money, and is to do what we just did with the joint use facilities, but try to find some other jurisdictions where that have jointly provided transportation for their kids or students. Like, is there, you know, where high school students are riding public buses? You know, are there other jurisdictions that are doing this? How are they doing it? How are they collaborating with buses? Kind of how are those, you know, how are they working with bus parking? You know, if they're electric, are they sharing the chargers? Kind of what, you know, what are the facilities that are doing that? So, I mean, and it's a couple of months, short time frame, but.
And then we have that party in May when you get the gold watch.
Yeah, I get the gold.
You and Claire. And then you're working with Kathleen and with Susan on getting a new chair. Is that how it works? With this commission? Okay.
Know anybody?
Interesting. How do they do it at the planning commission?
I mean, I'm just not familiar with, usually the commission, well, at least planning commission votes in the chair, or arts commission when I was on.
Yeah, I thought, yeah,
So that's, yeah, just
guess that's not here.
curious how things work on JFAC.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's a learning process for me too. I've never, you know, I mean, the only other committee I've been on was the Facilities Advisory Committee for APS. They just, it was not voted on. But I don't know how do they do it in Affairs Advisory Commission, or they're just appointed. They just get asked and
Board
they say,
appoints a chair.
what?
Or just decides what happens, what happens here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I
Fair.
was, so,
Very,
Yeah. Well,
Maybe.
we are,
I don't want to say,
well, you're all serving pleasure of
Yeah.
officials.
I understand
for
that.
them, So
Right.
they pick.
right, yeah, they pick.
But that's not common across all commissions, I guess.
No,
That
it's
is-
not.
That is under the law.
Right.
That's why we have. a
Planning commission
mutually-
elects their chair.
Huh?
Planning commission elects their own chair.
Planning commission is mandated to have a lot of independence.
and
Under
it's also appointed.
statute, right?
But it's also appointed. It's the same as all the other commissions. I was on the sports commission. It's all,
But the planning commission is like a Virginia mandated.
it's true, but they are, but they're all appointed as well.
Or,
Public comment.
yeah, do we have any public comment at the end of the meeting? Okay.
I did a
Okay.
comment. The three facilities, different school districts that were researched, was there like a reason why they were chosen? And like Alexandria and DC kind of come to mind, like particularly DC has like medical centers in their schools. Is there a reason why those were researched?
There was a DC Community Center researched at the last, that was presented at the last November. Report, you can watch
We'll
it.
do that, yeah.
And they were chosen, Wells and I worked together to choose them. I kind of just did a search, like, okay, I'm looking for joint use.
Yeah.
Joint use facilities, and I asked around for some of them I found, wanted to look for a variety of joint uses, so I looked at, public, public housing.
Mhm.
And, we wanted to have public housing in one, senior center in one, arts in one, a community school, and then kind of a joint, kind of a community, and then we wanted to look at just a kind of a community center.
Yeah.
We tried to find joint use facilities, jurisdictions that had some similarities to Arlington, whether it was like when we looked for the public housing. Like there were a couple of examples. Alexandria was considering putting public housing in, like approving public housing next to their schools. They actually didn't approve it, but there was a presentation that showed, I think around 5 other jurisdictions that did have public housing next to their schools. Most of them were on had tons of space, and Arlington just doesn't. So we chose Harlem as the one. The community schools, I tried to choose one that had a system, kind of system-wide, as opposed to just a singular school somewhere else. The art, I chose the arts one because I knew Diana had an interest in the arts.
Mentioned it. I didn't get a sense you had an interest. I don't know.
Yeah, so I wanted to find a high school
even a performing
that had, there was another joint use facility that Wells was like, yeah, let's use the one in Santa Ana, but that was a former middle school that they were going to shut down, that they converted into a different kind of space, which I thought we had one more group, would have been interesting to research. So it was kind of seeing what was out there, but then trying to find something that you could find some parallel.
One, I can look at DC. DC, they don't have yellow buses, I don't think. I can look at their public transportation for DC high school briefly, if you'd like, I can look at that.
Well, let's wait until April.
Okay.
And we can look to see, where there are. I haven't actually tried to look, but I think, just kind of lessons learned. And I think when we do it this way, it's
I think you should go run with it because budget season.
Yeah.
So for all we know, you may find some things, run with it. And we're talking about budget stuff.
Yeah.
You may
Right.
want to speak up.
Yeah.
I agree. You should do it.
Go ahead and
I'll
look.
look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, just information gathering, right?
From what I have heard, that it doesn't actually save people, jurisdictions money, but it might, and especially because we can't, Arlington bus drivers can't afford, school bus drivers can't afford to live in Arlington and have to live far away, and we have a hard time retaining them. And, that has to be a consideration too. It's always sort of a bigger picture. It's always, it's not always about just one piece of the problem. There's always, there's the chain of other problems that need to be addressed. It's not always a simple solution.
Maybe it's smaller vehicles help. I mean, so you have a people issue, and if you have smaller vehicles, you might have more people that can be driving the those vehicles, they can be better on streets and parking. But I mean, that's something where there's all sorts of transportation studies. So we're undertaking.
We all get TC and see what they do.
Right. I was curious,
Yeah.
someone said they didn't have to yell about it.
The only point of information about that is that right now, I think, and Kathleen, please correct me if I'm wrong, that APS school routes right now is one elementary, one middle, one high school for every single bus that goes. So they have 3 of them. So if we switch off the high school ones, we have to find compatible routes and move the starting times of the elementary schools and or middle schools so that they can still go do 3 routes per person per session. So in the mornings and the afternoons.
There is use in that fashion. Don't know that you would wind up with logistical issues if you thought having 2 and not 3 at the time. That impacts the drivers.
And if you have 2, you don't have to save any money.
Correct.
So
But
you-
elementary schools have been standardized, they used to be staggered, so you could still stagger. And some elementary schools are staggered.
I think-
They're not all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your high school times were no longer, weren't involved, then you could make your elementary and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your high schools could all start at 9 or 10. Let's change the start times again. That was so fun.
Every high schooler parent would be totally fine with
Let's
not.
put boundaries and start times.
Bring it.
With no
And-
money.
and option
With no
schools,
money.
all at once.
Yeah. Re-examine options all at once.
All right, I'm,
We're
Okay.
adjourned.
All right, thank you, everyone.
thank you.
And to answer your question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,